So I'm going to do a series of lessons on why I believe the church will either assist in the decline of America, the decline of our culture, or the church will assist in the rebuilding and the recapturing of what this nation was built upon, and that is God's principles in his word. The church will be either or. You know, when you think about this, sin has always been around. Satan has always been around. The things that we're dealing with today in our culture, our homes, communities, and our nation is not new. Sometimes we may think that the amount of things going on may be different because there are more people, but the sins are not new. But how are those things supposed to change? God, in his infinite wisdom, left the church here to bring about the change that everybody wants to see. We talk about change. We talk about crime. We talk about all the things that's going on with our teens. We talk about things that's going on in the world right now in race relations. But God left the church here to bring about that change. Change is not going to come by us just simply sitting back and not saying anything. And that's what's happening a lot of times when I look around at situations. So in this first video, I want to talk about something. I want to talk about the fact that the church will assist in the decline of America, and the culture if the church remains silent. Many Christians are afraid to say anything about anything because they are afraid of being castigated. They're afraid of being talked about. They're afraid of losing friends. They're afraid of people talking about them. They're just afraid of the things that will come after they start standing up. And that cannot be the case. But that was seen throughout the Bible, and Jesus addressed that. In Matthew chapter 10, Jesus talks about people being ashamed of him. In chapter 10, verse 32 and 33, and he says, "Don't be ashamed of me, or I'm going to be ashamed of you before my Father." But in John chapter 12, and let me show you an example of some people who were afraid to acknowledge Jesus because they were afraid of the consequences. In John chapter 12, verse number 42, it says, "Nevertheless, even among the rulers, many believed in him, but because of the Pharisees, they did not confess him, lest they be put out of the synagogue." It says many of the rulers believed Jesus, but they were afraid to confess him because they did not want to get put out of the synagogue. Now imagine what the confession of these leaders would have done for everybody else. Imagine what the confession of these rulers would have done for everybody else. It would have encouraged them. But because they kept their mouths closed and remained silent, it had no effect. They were afraid of the consequences. Also, some left Jesus when things got tough, when sayings got hard. John chapter 6 and verse number 66, after Jesus told this saying about eating of his flesh and drinking of his blood, in John 6 and verse number 66, it says, and from that time, many of his disciples went back and walked with him no more. Yes, it could have been because of this saying, but it could have been for some other things too. But the whole point is these disciples left Jesus. They didn't walk with him anymore because they couldn't handle the sayings. They couldn't handle this saying, or they couldn't handle the lifestyle. They left him and they did not walk with him anymore. And you know what? Silence. When we are ashamed of, and we are scared of the consequences, silence can sometimes suggest that you're in agreement with the people that you disagree with. In Psalms chapter 50, beginning with verse number 16, listen to what the psalmist says. "But to the wicked, God says, what right have you to declare my statutes or to take my covenant in your mouth, seeing that you hate instructions? And cast my words behind you. When you saw, now watch this, when you saw a thief, you consented with him, and have been a partaker with adulterers, and give your mouth to evil and your tongue to frame deceit. You sit and you speak against your brother, you slander your own mother's name." So he lists all these things that the wicked was doing. And then in verse number 21, these things, now watch this, these things you have done and I kept silent. And you thought I was altogether like you. You see the psalmist? The psalmist says, I kept quiet while you were doing all of these things, and you concluded that I was on your side. But then he says this right here. But now I will rebuke you and set them in order before your eyes. The psalmist says, I will sit around no longer and be silent and let you believe or even think that I am on your side. Now I'm ready to set these things in order. And that's what we have to do. We have to set these things in order because people's lives are going to be judged by the gospel. When Paul wrote to the Roman church in Romans 2 and verse 16, he told them that God would judge their secrets by Jesus Christ according to the gospel. If people are going to be judged by the gospel, what other way are they going to know the message of the gospel if not by us? If we are afraid or ashamed of telling people what they need to hear and ignoring the consequences, how will they ever know what they need to do to be saved? Paul said in Romans 1:16, I am not ashamed of the gospel of Christ because it is the power of God unto salvation. The gospel is what transforms lives. And if we are going to help reclaim this godly foundation that many Americans believe in our homes and in our communities, and if we're going to help reclaim the foundation on which America was built, and that is the foundation of God's word, if we're going to help reclaim that, we cannot be silent. If we're silent, we're just going to do one thing, and that is assist in the decay of our nation and assist in the decay of our culture. God bless you.